You know, sometimes you watch a film and it just sticks with you, makes you ask, could that really happen? I'm thinking about Saiyaara, that recent movie. It might have got you wondering about early onset Alzheimer's because, well, fiction is powerful, right? But it often takes liberties for the story. So our mission today is kind of unpack that, look at the overlap and maybe the surprising differences between Saiyaara's version of juvenile Alzheimer's and the actual science.
Yeah.
We're basing this on the sources you shared with us.
Exactly. And this is, I think, a really crucial exercise. We're talking about understanding a pretty rare and aggressive form of Alzheimer's. So this deep dive, it's kind of a shortcut for you, helping you get well informed, separating the drama from the actual diagnostic facts, how the disease really manifests.
Okay, so let's start with the movie. Vaani Batra, the main character in Saiyaara, she's a young poet, right? And she starts having these really rapid memory problems, confusion about who she is. It changes everything for her. Very dramatic portrayal.
Yeah, and if we connect that to the real world, early onset Alzheimer's disease, or EOAD, sometimes called juvenile Alzheimer's. It's only about, say, 5 to 10% of all Alzheimer's cases. So rare. And it can show up surprisingly early, even in someone's 30s. But here's a key difference from, let's say, late onset Alzheimer's. EOAD often progresses more aggressively. And this is important. In maybe up to 2/3 of cases, it doesn't start with memory loss. It might be issues with language or planning things, or even like understanding what you're seeing, visual spatial problems. And because it's rare and looks different, diagnosis often gets delayed, sometimes by a year and a half, even 2 years.
Okay. Starting with non-memory issues, that's quite striking. So if the classic signs aren't necessarily there first, how do doctors figure it out, especially when it's so atypical?
Right, that's where neuroimaging is just, well, indispensable. It's like a window onto the brain, truly. And what's fascinating is how these scans can show a unique kind of fingerprint for EOED, sometimes even before symptoms are obvious. An MRI scan, for example, it might show brain shrinkage or atrophy, but maybe in different areas than typical Alzheimer's, like more towards the back of the brain, the posterior regions, rather than the hippocampus, the main memory center, which might be relatively spared, at least initially. Then you have FDG-PE scans. These look at brain activity, metabolism. They can spot areas where the brain isn't using energy properly, hypometabolism, often before you can see shrinkage on an MRI. It's a really early clue. And then there are amyloid and tau BPD scans. These actually directly visualize the proteins involved, the amyloid plaques and the tau tangles, the underlying pathology.
Okay, that makes sense. Seeing the physical evidence. So now we have that scientific grounding. Let's circle back to Saiyaara. Let's unpack it. Where did the film, line up with the science, and where did it kind of go its own way?
Okay, so points of convergence. Vayani's diagnosis in her 20s. That is young, extremely young. But the sources do mention real cases, even the world's youngest diagnosed at just 19. So it's rare, but possible. And her memory loss, while maybe compressed for the film, does reflect the idea of significant brain changes, the kind you'd see on those scans eventually. But the divergences are pretty significant too. That precipitous course you mentioned, where everything happens over just months, that's much, much faster than usual for real juvenile Alzheimer's. Typically, it unfolds over years before reaching severe disability. And as we discussed, the movie really zooms in on memory loss and identity confusion. While in reality, EOAD often starts with those other things: language problems, trouble with planning, visual issues. The memory decline might come later or be less prominent initially. So the film definitely streamlined things, likely for narrative impact,
Right. Makes sense for a movie. So thinking about all this, what's the takeaway for you listening? Why does understanding this imaging stuff, the real presentation, why does it matter beyond just getting the diagnosis right?
Well, the impact is huge, actually. Having those imaging biomarkers, it gives diagnostic certainty. It helps avoid putting symptoms down to, say, stress or depression, which definitely happens with these atypical cases. Getting that certainty earlier also means potentially getting into therapeutic trials sooner, crucial for an aggressive disease. And maybe just as importantly, seeing the visual evidence from scans, it can be really powerful for patients and their families. It helps them understand this is a biological process, helps them grasp what's happening, and prepare for the future.
Yeah, it's really something how fiction can pull us in emotionally, make us connect. But it's the scientific understanding that gives you that depth, that clarity. It really highlights why it's so important to look past the dramatization sometimes, not to dismiss a story, but to really get the full picture.
Absolutely. And understanding these precise ways a disease shows up, even when it's fictionalized, it empowers us, right? It helps us better support people actually affected by it and appreciate just how complex diagnosis and research really are. So maybe something for you to think about is, how powerful can a story be, even when it diverges quite a bit from the scientific reality? What stands out to you there?